Chapter 1, Captain Tanner, I'm requesting to join the undercover operation. In the silent room, Vesper Hawthorne's voice was low but exceptionally firm and resolute. A long silence hung in the air before Captain Tanner's grave voice came through. Vesper, you should know how dangerous this undercover mission is. Once you go, there's a high chance you won't come back. You've just been injured. You should be recuperating. Besides, would your boyfriend agree to let you go? Aren't you two getting married? Vesper knew Captain Tanner was saying all this out of concern for her, but her mind was made up. Joining this undercover operation is my personal decision. It has nothing to do with him. Besides, I'm planning to break up with him. You don't need to consider these external factors. Captain Tanner, on the other end of the line, hadn't expected this at all. He was about to ask for details when Vesper cut him off. Captain Tanner, you should know that I'm the most suitable person in the entire unit for this mission. Please give me a chance. A long sigh came through the phone. After a moment of silence, Captain Tanner spoke, his voice heavy with meaning. All right then, take these next 2 weeks to prepare yourself, then wait for the organization's call. Captain Tanner's tone was quite significant, and Vesper understood the unspoken message. He wanted her to be fully prepared final arrangements. Everything had to be considered. Undercover missions like this were always a dance with death, a near-suicide mission. If she truly didn't return, she needed to have things settled for her family. But as things stood, she no longer needed to answer to anyone. After hanging up, Vesper's gaze fell upon 2 framed photos on her bedside table. They were the most important people in her life. The first was of her parents. The second was of her boyfriend. When she was 10, her parents died in the line of duty, leaving her an orphan. Learning that her parents' only regrets before dying were not being able to care for her anymore and not receiving the Medal of Valor, on the day she buried their ashes, she stood before their gravestones and made a vow. She would carry on their torch, uphold their legacy. She would inherit their aspirations and strive for the Medal of Valor to honor their spirits. At 22, she successfully joined the Criminal Investigation Department with outstanding results. That same year, she met Preston Sterling. To outsiders, he was an ace lawyer, cool, upright, and seemingly uninterested in women. Yet, he had fallen for her at first sight, doing everything he could to get her messaging app contact, asking her out for dinner and movies, taking care of her in every way, and preparing many surprises. She, too, had fallen into this love, agreeing to be his girlfriend. After they officially started dating, he became even more devoted. If she worked a night shift, he would drive over in the dead of night to bring her favorite late-night snacks. Whenever she was on a mission, he would be fraught with worry and anxiety, unable to find peace. When she told him about her dreams, he would smile, hold her, and say she would definitely achieve them. Vesper thought she had truly found someone worth entrusting her life to until their 5th anniversary. Preston gave her address and asked her to wear it to meet him at a very remote location. She waited there for a long time. He never came. Instead, a masked, knife-wielding attacker appeared. She was chloroformed, her mouth and nose covered, and dragged into a car. When she woke up, she found herself locked in a basement. The attacker caressed her face and said something that made her blood run cold. Such a resemblance, uncanny. No wonder that Sterling fellow likes you so much. But what's the use of looking alike? You're not her. Weren't you just pushed out as bait? It was at that moment Vesper learned what Preston had hidden from her. Preston had a childhood sweetheart, Serafina Shaw, an A-list actress. To the world, he was cool and distant, but he was different with her. He had adored and protected her since childhood. But on the very day he had planned a romantic surprise to confess his feelings, Serafina was kidnapped by a fanatical stalker. When she was finally found, she was covered in blood, delirious, and subsequently fell into a vegetative state. The attacker, however, had escaped and remained at large for many years, never apprehended. After the incident, Preston was devastated. From then on, only 2 things mattered to him. The first was to wait for Serafina to wake up. The second was to relentlessly search for the stalker, wanting to bring him to justice. The first time he saw Vesper, he was captivated, because she bore an uncanny resemblance to Serafina. So, he pursued her, using her face as a vessel for his longing for Serafina. Beyond that, he also schemed to use her face to lure out the attacker. He waited for 5 years and finally found a trace of the attacker, meticulously planning everything. During the 7 hours she was held captive, Vesper was tortured, covered in wounds, and on the verge of a mental breakdown. She was rescued only moments before she was to be murdered. Preston got his wish in the end. The attacker was successfully captured, but the price was Vesper's right hand, crippled beyond repair. It took her a long time to process everything, to accept that she was a stand-in, to accept the fact that her hand was maimed. Her heart like dead ashes, Vesper no longer held any hope for love. But the price she paid was the loss of all her faith. She could no longer be on the front lines, nor could she achieve her dream of the Medal of Valor. Fortunately, yesterday, she overheard colleagues who came to visit her idly chatting about a plan within the department to dismantle a dark organization, requiring 3 undercover agents. Only 2 spots had been confirmed. The third, due to the extreme danger involved, had yet to be filled. She immediately decided to apply to join this takedown operation, to become the 3rd undercover agent. She knew she would be chosen because she met all the conditions. Especially since her hand was crippled, this was even more advantageous for the plan. After all, no one would suspect someone with a maimed hand. For her country, and for her dream of the Medal of Valor, she would do it without hesitation, without regret, even if it meant death. As for Preston Sterling, their paths would diverge from now on. She was done with him. Vesper silently sorted through all the belongings in this home. By the time she finished, it was already 11 o'clock. Suddenly, footsteps sounded outside the door. Preston was home. He pushed the door open, a smile on his face as he was about to say something, but then his brow furrowed upon seeing the packed boxes. "Ves, what are you doing packing all this?" Chapter 2, Vesper couldn't reveal the plan to anyone, so she said lightly, "I resigned." Preston was stunned. "Weren't they going to transfer you to a desk job?" Hearing this, Vesper turned to look at him. "I told you, my dream is the Medal of Valor, the front lines." She was merely stating an objective fact, with no hint of resentment in her tone. But Preston's heart clenched. His palms grew slightly sweaty, a flicker of remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring up these painful memories." Vesper shook her head and zipped up the suitcase. "It's not your fault." Though she said that, Preston still felt terrible. He had hidden so much from her, and now he had caused her hand to be crippled. He didn't know how to comfort her, and his words became somewhat incoherent. "Resigned? Well, resigning is good too. You can rest at home. I'll take care of you." "Take care of her?" Vesper stared at him, a mix of emotions churning within her. He never understood her. She shook her head, said nothing, and went to wash up and get ready for bed. After the bedroom light was turned off, Preston hugged her from behind, his warm breath caressing her neck. He seemed to want to kiss her. Vesper quickly used her elbow to create distance between them, moving closer to the wall. Rejected, Preston's voice held a note of surprise. "Ves, sorry, my hand isn't feeling great today. I want to rest early." Then, good night. 3 days later, it was Vesper's birthday. On this day, Preston specially took leave from work to stay home and personally cooked a large spread of dishes. She wore a birthday hat, looking at the table full of spicy food, her thoughts drifting far away. Preston loved to cook for her, but he always filled the dishes with chili peppers. She had told him many times that she couldn't handle spicy food, but he always said it was the only style he knew. To not disappoint him, she learned to eat spicy food, often to the point of getting heartburn and an upset stomach, yet she endured it willingly. Now she knew the truth, knew that someone else loved spicy food, knew that he was seeing someone else through her, reminiscing about another person. She didn't want to force herself anymore, so she hesitated to pick up her chopsticks. Preston quickly noticed and asked her what was wrong. Vesper rolled up her sleeves, revealing the hideous scar on her wrist, took the cake from the side, and said calmly, "At my last checkup, the doctor said I need to eat a bland diet." A flicker of guilt crossed Preston's eyes. He picked up a plate and stood up, saying he would make something else. Vesper, while unwrapping the cake, stopped him. "No need, I'm not hungry, I'll eat later." Preston froze for a moment, not knowing what else to say, and could only help her insert the candles and light them. She closed her eyes, clasped her hands together, and devoutly made a wish. This year's wish is to successfully receive the Medal of Valor. Hearing the last few words, Preston's brow furrowed tightly, his face filled with shock. Hadn't she already resigned? How could she get the Medal of Valor then? He was about to ask when his phone suddenly vibrated a few times. "Seeing Doctor Jennings' name, his heart skipped a beat. He answered it directly, not even caring about the risk of her finding out. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Shaw is awake." These words exploded in Preston's ears like a clap of thunder. He abruptly stood up, pushing his chair back, and without grabbing a coat or changing his shoes, he bolted towards the door. He left without a single word. Vesper, who opened her eyes at the commotion, only saw his rapidly retreating figure. She didn't know what had happened. After hesitating for a few seconds, she grabbed a coat and chased after him. As soon as she got downstairs, she saw Preston slam on the accelerator and speed away, driving so fast it was as if he had a death wish. This frantic behavior frightened Vesper. Acting on her professional instinct to protect the public, she feared he would cause an accident and quickly hailed a cab to follow him. He drove west all the way to the hospital, got out of the car, and rushed straight to the 3rd floor. She hurried after him, arriving outside a hospital room, still catching her breath, when she saw Preston hugging someone and crying his eyes out. Due to his profession, he was usually very emotionally reserved. This was the first time Vesper had seen him so agitated. And when the person in his arms lifted her head, revealing a tear-streaked, beautiful face, Vesper froze on the spot. She had heard the attacker say that she and Seraphina Shaw looked incredibly alike, especially their profiles, as if cast from the same mold. Until she saw it with her own eyes today, she hadn't known it was the truth. After a moment of shock, complex emotions rose in Vesper's heart. She finally understood why he was so distraught. It turned out the person he had waited 5 years for had woken up. Chapter 3, listening to the two inside, crying and speaking of their mutual longing and 5 years of regret, Vesper looked at the coat in her hand, a self-deprecating smile playing on her lips. She took a deep breath, suppressed the surging emotions, and turned to leave the hospital. When she returned home, she found that the candles she hadn't had time to blow out before leaving had already burned down, charring a patch of the white cream on the cake. She brought over the trash can and scraped the food from the table and the cake into it. Then she went back to the bedroom, turned off the lights, and quietly spent the rest of her 27th birthday in the darkness. For the next week, Preston seemed to have vanished into thin air, all contact lost. Vesper didn't try to disturb him. She stayed home alone, slowly packing up many things, making trip after trip downstairs to throw them away, not finding it troublesome at all. After clearing out the last cabinet, she looked at the much emptier room, pushed a small cart, and went downstairs. Because of the injury to her hand, it took a great deal of effort to toss the last bag of things into the dumpster. Just as she finished, she was rubbing her wrist when she looked up and saw a preoccupied Preston. Having not seen him for a few days, Vesper thought he would be very happy, especially since Seraphina had woken up. So, seeing his worried frown, she found it a bit hard to understand for a moment. Perhaps noticing her gaze, Preston also looked up. Seeing it was her, he quickened his pace and walked over. "Why are you downstairs? What are you throwing out?" "Trash." Hearing this answer, he glanced sideways at the dumpster, frowning when he saw the large bags inside. "You have an injured hand. Why didn't you leave the trash for me to deal with when I got back?" Vesper smiled, placing her hand on the small cart beside her. "I have the cart. It's not heavy. Besides, you haven't been home these past few days, and trash can't sit around for too long." Preston then remembered that he had left without explanation on her birthday and disappeared for several days without a trace. A flicker of panic crossed his face, and he quickly made an excuse. "Vess, that day I received a call from a client who was in danger. She was out of town, and I was worried something might happen to her, so I had to rush off on a business trip. I made you worry, I'm sorry." This hastily concocted lie was clumsy, but Vesper still didn't expose it, instead offering him an out. "Since you're back, was everything resolved smoothly?" Preston looked at her seemingly convinced expression, somewhat speechless. For the past few days, he had been at the hospital, not leaving Seraphina's side for a moment. Because he knew how painful loss was, so when he had her again, he didn't want to waste a single second. Parents, girlfriend, work, everything had been pushed to the back of his mind. Until this morning, Seraphina, perhaps having heard from friends about everything he had done for her over the years, was deeply moved and took the initiative to break the ice between them. "Please, I know you like me, and I've liked you for a long time too. Will you be my boyfriend?" Preston had waited nearly 20 years for these words, but when he actually heard them, his heart wasn't as happy as he had imagined. Instead, another name surfaced in his mind. Vesper Hawthorne. The bits and pieces of their 5 years together replayed in his mind like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Her kiss on his face on New Year's Eve, the scarf she knitted for him after staying up for several nights, the umbrella she brought to his office during a typhoon scene after scene flashed by, each frame etched with Vesper Hawthorne's name. Finally, the image settled on her bloodied hands as she was carried out, rescued that day. In an instant, Preston's heart felt as if it had been viciously stabbed, a fine, sharp pain spreading through him. He knew that because of his selfishness, Vesper could no longer realize her dreams and ambitions. Her life was utterly ruined by his hands. Guilt, remorse, and an unknown emotion crazily invaded his heart, making it impossible for him to say yes, no matter what. He didn't know how much time had passed before he finally calmed down and replied to Serafina in a hoarse voice. "I'm sorry, I need some time to think." Serafina hadn't expected to be rejected. After all, everyone around them could see how much Preston liked her. Preston didn't know how to face her and found an excuse to leave the hospital. Seeing Vesper now, his heart was even more chaotic. He felt that every lie he told became a stone smashing down on his heart, crushing him until he couldn't breathe. He hesitated for a long time, finally speaking the truth. "It'll still be some time." Looking at his eyes, Vesper guessed that he and Serafina had probably talked things through. Now that the person he was waiting for had awakened, she too had completely let go. She didn't want to continue this charade, so she asked, in a joking tone, yet with sincere intent, the question that was truly on her mind. "Preston Sterling, how about we break up?" Chapter 4, hearing the words break up, Preston's expression changed instantly. He hugged her tightly, his voice rising several octaves. "Break up? I don't agree, Vess. Everything's fine. Why would you suddenly want to break up?" Seeing his tense demeanor, Vesper was, for the first time, somewhat surprised. His beloved had awakened. If she took the initiative to break up and let them be together, he should be very happy. Why this expression, as if he were terrified of losing her? She didn't want to flatter herself. The only explanation was that, although he liked Serafina, his indirect actions had caused Vesper to become disabled. The guilt and self-blame in his heart were at play, making it impossible for him to abandon her at this moment. Vesper had intended to break up with him directly and end everything, but judging from his current reaction, he would definitely not agree easily. However, the undercover mission was top secret. She couldn't risk alerting anyone. It seemed she could only break up with him secretly and then leave secretly. At his words, she smiled faintly and smoothly glossed over the situation. "You didn't seem very happy, so I thought I'd make a joke to lighten the mood. Don't take it seriously." Preston stared intently at her face, seeing no trace of a lie, and only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. He took the cart from her and led her upstairs. "Don't make jokes like that again. I promise to take care of you for life." Hearing this, Vesper glanced sideways at him, many memories flashing through her mind. During the period when she first learned the truth, she had indeed been in agony for a long time. She began to doubt if she was unworthy of love, to suspect if fate was deliberately toying with her. She resisted accepting the reality of her disability, pushed everyone away, and locked herself in her hospital room, crying for a long time. But in the end, the capacity for rational thought she had cultivated over many years triumphed over these despairing emotions. She repeatedly asked herself, since she was a police officer, wasn't it her mission to apprehend criminals and protect the people? The answer was a resounding yes. Her hand was crippled, but the culprit had been caught, and no one else would be harmed in the future. To be precise, she hadn't saved Preston's beloved, but Serafina Shaw, the person. This girl, who should have been shining on stage, had been lying in a hospital for 5 years. With the true culprit brought to justice, wasn't this a form of solace for this innocent victim? Realizing this, Vesper completely let go of her inner turmoil and no longer harbored hatred for anyone. So, hearing Preston say this again, she released his hand, looked at him steadily, and solemnly shook her head. "I don't need you to take care of me. From the day I reactivated my badge number, I was prepared to bleed and get injured. I am committed to dedicating everything I have, including my life, to the country. As long as the culprits receive the punishment they deserve, all sacrifices are worthwhile. Although I can no longer go to the front lines, I will still find another way to realize my beliefs. Things being as they are, let's both look forward. After all, new stories lie ahead. These were Vesper's heartfelt words, and the last sentence in particular was laden with implication. But Preston, immersed in guilt, didn't catch her meaning. Instead, her serious and solemn demeanor, coupled with the truth he had concealed, plunged him into even greater self-reproach. He didn't know what to say, only able to try and compensate her through actions. So, for the next week or so, unless absolutely necessary, he barely left the house, staying home to care for Vesper. He took over all the housework, tried to cheer her up, accompanied her to follow-up appointments, and even gave her many gifts, saying they were birthday presents. Occasionally, in a daze, seeing his attentive, considerate, and exceedingly gentle demeanor, Vesper almost thought the events of the past 2 months had been a dream. No kidnapper, no undercover mission, no Serafina Shaw, it was all just her hallucination. She could fulfill the vow she made at her parents' grave, live a simple life with the person she loved, and grow old together. But as soon as she saw the scar on her hand, and then the figure of Preston on the balcony, avoiding her while taking a call, in an instant she would snap back to reality. Chapter 5. On the winter solstice, Vesper woke up to hot dumplings and sweet soy milk. After eating, she sat on the sofa, opened her phone, and saw 2 new messages. One was a text from the bank, informing her that $8 million USD had been credited to her account. The other was a contact request on her messaging app with the name Serafina Shaw. She frowned, accepted the request, and a few seconds later, a message arrived. Miss Hawthorne, thank you for taking care of Prees all these years, and thank you for helping us catch the culprit. Because of your injury, Prees has been feeling incredibly guilty. I'm contacting you today with no other intention. This money is to compensate you. Can you understand my meaning? Vesper hadn't expected Serafina to know about her injury, much less that she would proactively contact her. She was stunned for a moment, about to reply, but her face darkened when she saw the $8 million. She was a public servant. She absolutely could not touch this money. Serafina couldn't possibly be unaware of this. So, after careful consideration, she didn't transfer the money back herself but replied to Serafina, wanting to arrange a meeting to discuss how to return it. After setting a time and place, she saw Preston working in the study and didn't disturb him, leaving the house alone. When she arrived at the coffee shop, Serafina also showed a look of surprise upon seeing her. Vesper nodded in acknowledgement and sat down without speaking. After a few minutes of silence, Serafina couldn't hold back any longer and spoke first. But what she talked about wasn't the money, but rather reminiscing about her past with Preston. Miss Hawthorne, I hear you've known Prees for 5 years. Do you know how long I've known him? This year marks exactly 20 years. We've liked each other since our first meeting, inseparable from kindergarten through high school and university. I love spicy food, so he learned to cook Hunan cuisine. Every New Year's Eve, I have to go to the amusement park to watch fireworks, and he always remembers. Every time it's his birthday, I go with him to the lakeside to watch fireworks. We've already arranged to go there next month. Will you be attending? If you do, you could order a suit for him from that tailor on King Street. I introduced it to him. He really likes their craftsmanship. Listening to Serafina ostentatiously recount these things, Vesper remained silent. The ever-present chili peppers on the dining table, the fixed New Year's Eve plans, the unchanging birthday venue, and the consistent answer of a suit from the tailor on King Street. Whenever she asked him about gifts, every single thing was actually what Serafina liked. All these years, from beginning to end, Preston had only been looking at her face, reminiscing about an old flame. Vesper listened quietly, but she didn't feel sad. Times had changed, she had already let go. So she didn't interrupt, quietly waiting for Serafina to finish, then pushed the bank card across the table. Miss Shaw, I will not accept this money. Please contact the bank to have it returned. Also, I know your real purpose for asking me out today. Between Preston and me, you can rest assured, there will be a resolution soon. Serafina had indeed come here today after investigating and finding out that Preston had found a stand-in during the years she was in a coma. And now, he was hesitating to agree to be with her because of this stand-in. She was agitated and deliberately came to provoke Vesper, hoping she would back down voluntarily. But she hadn't expected things to go so smoothly, nor had she expected Vesper's reaction. She was about to speak when the door to their private room was suddenly pushed open. Chapter 6. The moment she saw Preston's face, she quickly and nervously hid the card. Vesper hadn't expected him to appear suddenly either. Just as she was about to ask him how he came to be there, Preston, his face grim, stepped in front of Serafina, his sharp gaze fixed on Vesper, his tone icy. "Why do you know Sierra?" His expression clearly showed he was terrified she would harm Serafina. Her hand was crippled, yet he only thought of protecting his white moonlight. Vesper curled her lip in a self-mocking sneer, her expression unchanging as she lied. "I was out for coffee and just happened to run into this lady. Because we look so much alike, we sat down and chatted for a bit." Serafina, not wanting him to find out about the 8 million, also played along. "Yes, I invited her. I've never met anyone who looks so much like me. Please, do you know this lady? Why don't you introduce us?" Preston frowned. Seeing that both admitted they didn't know each other well, he breathed a slight sigh of relief. He didn't want them to know each other, but he also knew that an outright refusal would be suspicious, so he could only make the introductions. "This is my childhood friend, Serafina Shaw." Hearing her name, Serafina smiled and extended a hand, saying, "A pleasure." "This is my friend, Vesper Hawthorne." As the words left his mouth, Preston faltered. He hesitated for a long time, ultimately omitting the word girlfriend. Vesper looked up and met his gaze steadily for a moment, but she said nothing, shifting her gaze to the hand extended before her and gently shaking it. "A pleasure." The three of them, with unspoken understanding, tacitly moved past what had just happened. Preston was about to find an excuse to leave with Serafina, but Serafina smiled, linked arms with Vesper as if they were old friends, said it was almost dinner time, and insisted on Vesper joining them. Preston had always found it hard to refuse her, so he had no choice but to take both of them to a nearby restaurant. After finding a suitable table and sitting down, Serafina removed her sunglasses and hat and was about to order when a sudden commotion erupted around them. Before she could react, a large group of fans swarmed around them, clamoring for autographs and photos. The news of Serafina's recovery hadn't been officially released, but fans had already heard rumors. Encountering her in a restaurant now, they were naturally too excited to control their emotions and surged forward. "Quick, it's Serafina Shaw. Sierra, I love you so much, can I have your autograph? Sign for me first, sign for me first." In just a few minutes, the entire restaurant was packed to capacity, with a continuous stream of onlookers downstairs trying to push their way up. Dinner was out of the question, and Serafina, frightened by these fanatical fans, suffered a relapse of her trauma, reminded of her kidnapping. She broke out in a cold sweat, trembling all over. "Please," Preston quickly and tenderly shielded her, guiding her into a private room to barely escape the crowd. Seemingly reminded of being kidnapped by a fanatical fan, Serafina buried herself in his arms and instantly burst into tears, gasping for breath. "Please, I'm scared, I'm so scared. Don't be afraid, sweetheart, I'll get you out of here right away." Preston was frantic. He thought of several plans, but the way ahead was completely blocked, making them impossible to implement. He watched as the crowd chanted Serafina's name, looking like they wouldn't leave until they saw her. He clenched his fists, his gaze turning to Vesper. "Ves, could you swap clothes with Sierra and help draw these fans away? She's not in a good state, I'm a bit worried." Chapter 7. Vesper looked at him deeply, her eyes filled with complex emotions. Preston knew his request was presumptuous and rude, and the guilt in his heart grew heavier. He wanted to explain further, but Vesper had already taken off her jacket and handed it over. Then she quickly took Serafina's coat, sunglasses, and hat, pushed open the door, and walked out. As soon as she closed the door, fans surged from all directions, calling Serafina's name. To buy them time to leave, she could neither deny who she was nor be recognized, so she could only pull her hat low, keep her head down, and walk out quickly. But no matter how fast she walked, it wasn't long before the rapidly approaching fans caught up with her. Reaching a small alley, she was grabbed by a group of people and cornered. She stumbled and fell into the crowd, and several burly men, each weighing over 200 pounds, stepped on her injured hand. These fanatical fans had no intention of letting her go. They squatted down, snatching at her hat and sunglasses, even tearing her coat. Finally, someone realized they had the wrong person, and everyone left, cursing and muttering. Only after everyone was gone did Vesper manage to push herself up with her left hand, staggering to her feet. After returning home, she found the first aid kit in a cabinet and treated her injuries herself. Just as she finished bandaging herself, Preston returned. He kept his head down, afraid to look at her face, his voice full of hesitation. "Tonight," Vesper had no energy to listen to his explanations. She endured the pain, put on her coat, and said lightly, "No matter who it was today, I would have done the same. My job is to protect the public, and I'm willing to pay any price for that. So you don't need to explain, and you don't need to apologize." Preston's intuition told him something was off about her words, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was, so he temporarily set it aside, intending to ask about her well-being. But before he could speak, Vesper interrupted him. "Is Miss Shaw all right?" "She's fine, just a little shaken." At this, he seemed to remember something, and his recently smoothed brow furrowed again. "Sierra went through some bad things before and has some psychological trauma. She was quite frightened today. I'm a bit worried about her. I should go check on her again. You get some rest early, don't wait up for me." As he spoke, he hurriedly left, not noticing the blood-stained cotton swabs in the trash can. He also forgot to show concern for Vesper. Preston was gone for 4 or 5 days this time. But through his social media feed, Vesper could clearly track his movements. He accompanied Serafina back to their alma mater for a class reunion, took drinks for her, went to the beach together to admire the most brilliant and romantic sunset, and did pottery together. Every photo was focused on Preston. His gaze was always on Serafina. The camera captured the moments he looked at her, his eyes filled with tender affection. Vesper swiped her finger, scrolling through the photos one by one, slowly recalling many past events. Before, when she was with Preston, he would also often glance sideways at her. Every time she turned her head, she could catch a different kind of emotion in those clear, bright eyes. Not infatuation or affection, not focus or tenderness, but nostalgia, as if he were looking through her at someone else. Fortunately, from now on, he wouldn't have to indulge in the past anymore. Thinking of this, Vesper chuckled softly. She was about to close her phone when a message suddenly popped up from Captain Tanner. Undercover operation, officially launching on December 29th. Vesper's expression instantly turned serious and solemn. She looked up at the calendar on the desk, her gaze locking onto the 29th, and murmured, "Only 3 days left." Chapter 8, with a click, the main door was pushed open. Preston walked in, bringing a chill with him, speaking to her with a smile as he changed his shoes. 3 days? What's only 3 days left?" Vesper shook her head slightly, changing the subject. "Nothing. I heard it's supposed to snow in 3 days." Preston glanced at the sky outside the window, chatted with her for a few sentences, then went into the study. Hearing the sound of a video conference from inside, Vesper silently got up, pushed all the things she had cleared out over the past few days downstairs, and smashed and discarded them one by one. By the time she returned, Preston's meeting was over. He was frowning, rummaging through a cabinet for something. Hearing the door open, he looked up at her. "Vess, what happened to the photos we took together? And the scarf and gloves you knitted for me, where did you put them?" Vesper's footsteps faltered. She lowered her head and answered him in a low voice. "The cabinet was too damp. The photos weren't laminated and got distorted, so I sent them for repair. The scarf and gloves got moldy, so I threw them away." Preston nodded thoughtfully, but images suddenly flashed through his mind. He had put those photos into the album himself. He remembered they were laminated. Could he be mistaken? He was about to ask when the phone on the table suddenly rang a few times. He picked it up and tapped it open. The next second after seeing the message, he completely forgot the question he had just been about to ask. At night, the winter wind howled outside the window, but a faint, long, and steady breathing sound could be heard nearby. Under the dim nightlight, Vesper turned to look at Preston's closed eyes and took his phone from under his pillow. As soon as she entered the password, the chat interface with Serafina popped up. Vesper scrolled through the chat history, seeing him share every detail of his daily life with Serafina, seeing him readily agree to all her requests, seeing him also cautiously admit his mistakes. A flicker of understanding crossed her eyes. So this is what he's like when he likes someone. Vesper didn't scroll up further. She tapped the back button and immediately saw the 2 pinned chats at the top. One was Serafina, the other was her. She glanced at him, then long pressed her own profile picture and unpinned it. Then she tapped into it again, and on the profile settings page, pressed the delete button. Soon, she would completely disappear from his world. Everything related to her should also be deleted. A good night's sleep. When she woke up the next day, the pillow beside her was empty. She changed into a black outfit, took an umbrella, and was about to leave when she ran into Preston, who was returning with breakfast. "It's raining so hard, where are you going?" Seeing no change in his expression, Vesper knew he hadn't discovered that she had unpinned and blocked him. Well, he was so focused on Serafina now, how would he notice such trivial things? She answered him softly, "To the cemetery, to see Mom and Dad." Preston stood blankly. Today was neither a memorial holiday nor their birth or death anniversary. Why suddenly go to the cemetery? He pondered for a moment, still feeling a bit uneasy, so he put down the breakfast and went out with her. "Vess, I'll go with you." Chapter 9. At the florist, Vesper was paying for a bouquet of chrysanthemums while Preston, waiting nearby, received a call from Serafina. "Pries, where are you? Why aren't you at my birthday party yet?" Preston glanced at his watch. It was only 10 o'clock. He softened his voice, "I'll be there a bit later." But Serafina on the other end wouldn't have it, coquettishly insisting he come over now. Preston knew that if he refused again, she would get angry. But he was currently planning to accompany Vesper to pay respects to her parents, so he hesitated for a moment. Vesper looked up upon hearing his voice, saw his troubled expression, and kindly offered him an out. "If you have something to do, go ahead and take care of it." Preston didn't notice her indifferent demeanor, so he didn't decline. He opened an umbrella and saw her into a taxi. "Go and come back soon. Hold the umbrella properly, don't catch a cold." After seeing her nod in agreement, he turned and left. Half an hour later, the car reached its destination. Vesper paid the fare, holding the umbrella in one hand and the flowers in the other, and slowly walked towards the depths of the cemetery. Looking at the long list of meritorious deeds on the martyrs' tombstones, Vesper silently placed the flowers down, raised her scarred right hand, and saluted. She just wanted to see her parents one last time before she left. She hadn't prepared any words, because she knew they would surely understand her choice, just as she had never blamed them for theirs. On the way back, she opened the birthday video Serafina had just posted. In a hall lavishly decorated with flowers and balloons, Serafina, wearing a beautiful princess dress, made her entrance amidst a sea of blessings. Preston smiled and presented her with a bouquet of roses, then bent down to lift her long skirt train. Sounds of teasing and envious admiration came from the surroundings, saying the two were truly a match made in heaven. Vesper watched the 5-minute video all the way. It wasn't until the driver reminded her they had arrived that she snapped back to reality and turned off her phone. Then she returned alone to her cold, empty home. Preston didn't come back all night. When she woke up again, Vesper looked at the date, December 29th, on the screen, silently got up, and destroyed everything related to herself. Busy until evening, she glanced around the empty house, then returned to the bedroom and closed her suitcase. As she was about to leave, a call suddenly came in. "Sister-in-law, Mr. Sterling is at a dinner with us and he's drunk. Would you mind coming to pick him up?" Captain Tanner hadn't sent a message yet, there was still time. So Vesper made the trip. She helped the heavily intoxicated Preston home and laid him on the sofa. But he clung to her, refusing to let go, his face contorted, his voice sounding pained. "Sierra, my stomach hurts." After a few seconds of silence, Vesper was about to call for an ambulance when a message came from Captain Tanner. "Undercover operation, commencing immediately." Looking at Preston, curled up in pain and drenched in sweat, Vesper thought for a few seconds and sent a message to Serafina. "I'm leaving North City immediately. Preston is drunk, come and take care of him." Serafina didn't reply, but 10 minutes later, a knock came from the door. Vesper replied, "Received," to Captain Tanner, then placed the breakup letter she had printed during the day on the bedside table, pushed her suitcase to the door, and opened it. The two women looked at each other, neither spoke. As they passed each other, Vesper heard Preston on the sofa suddenly call out, "Vess." She was surprised he would actually call her name. She didn't understand his intention, but she didn't look at him, nor did she turn back. "Preston Sterling, this time, I'm returning you completely to Serafina Shaw. And I will offer my life to my country." A faint smile touched her lips, her fingers gently pushed. With a thud, the door closed. Chapter 10. When Preston Sterling woke up, he found himself in the hospital. Due to the hangover, his mind was groggy, and his voice was exceptionally deep. "How did I get here?" Serafina Shaw, who was beside him, heard his voice and saw him wake up. She quickly bent down to help him up, then handed him a glass of warm water, her tone tinged with complaint. "You still ask, who told you to drink so much? If I hadn't brought you to the hospital yesterday, you probably would have vomited yourself unconscious." Preston drank the water and finally felt a bit more clear-headed. He looked at Serafina's unhappy face, and some vague memories flashed through his mind. He remembered going home last night. Shouldn't Vesper Hawthorne have been the one to bring him to the hospital? He thought for a long time but couldn't figure it out, so he asked tentatively, "Yesterday, did you go to my place?" Only then did Serafina realize she had let something slip. She froze on the spot, not knowing how to cover it up. Seeing her silence, Preston's heart skipped a beat and his face turned incredibly ugly. He grabbed her hand, his voice full of panic. "Sierra, listen to me explain. Vesper and I..." Serafina knew what he wanted to say. But yesterday, she had seen the breakup letter at his home and knew Vesper wouldn't be coming back. The hidden worry in her heart had completely dissipated. So, seeing his nervous look now, she even felt a little sorry for him. She interrupted him and told him everything. "I know. You were with Vesper Hawthorne to help me catch the culprit. She got injured and her life is ruined. You feel very guilty, so you never brought up breaking up. I knew all this before I was discharged from the hospital." Hearing this, Preston's mind went blank. He thought he had hidden it well, but he never expected her to have known all along. There was no blame in Serafina's tone, but he became even more flustered, remembering many things. He gripped the bedsheet tightly, his eyes filled with guilt and regret, rambling incoherently. "It was my fault, all my fault. If I had taken you to the airport that day, you wouldn't have gotten into trouble. Then Vesper wouldn't have met me, wouldn't have gotten hurt. I'm sorry to both of you." Seeing him on the verge of collapse from self-blame, Serafina felt as if her heart was being torn apart. She had known Preston for so many years and knew that if it concerned her, he would take all the blame upon himself. She also knew Vesper was innocent, but what had happened. No amount of regret was of any use. That's why she wanted to compensate Vesper with money. Vesper couldn't be a police officer anymore, but with this money, at least her future would be secure. But Vesper had refused her compensation and had now left, all alone. Serafina didn't feel good about it either, but she had no other choice. She had also loved Preston for many years and had almost spent the rest of her life unconscious in a hospital bed. To wake up again, she felt it was a miracle, a stroke of luck. So she couldn't accept losing Preston again. But if he couldn't let go of the past, drowning in guilt, how would they spend the rest of their lives together? Thinking of this, Serafina's chaotic heart suddenly firmed up a bit. She took the letter out of her bag and handed it to Preston. "Please, actually, Officer Hawthorne knew about these things too. Our last meeting wasn't a chance encounter. She asked me out to talk things through properly. She left yesterday. This is the letter she left for you. Take a look." These words fell on Preston's ears like a bomb, causing his entire body to stiffen. His pupils dilated to their limit, his shoulders trembled uncontrollably, and a chill enveloped his whole being. He seemed half-numb, like a robot, as he took the envelope and slowly opened it. The neat printed characters on the white paper came into view. Chapter 11, Preston Sterling, by the time you read this letter, I will have already left North City. There are some things I actually wanted to tell you in person, but you were late in returning, so I can only inform you by letter. The first thing is, I want to inform you that I've decided to break up. You might ask why. The reason is actually very simple. The person you love has never been me, and I don't love you anymore either. So, there's no need for us to be entangled any longer. Let's both move forward. You go pursue the love in your heart, and I wish you success in achieving your desires and a lifetime of happiness. The second thing is, don't come looking for me, and don't try to find out any news about me. I'm starting a new life. This is a new path I've chosen for myself after careful consideration. This path will have different scenery and an uncertain future, but it's what my heart desires. And the story between you and me has completely ended. Please don't disturb me anymore. The third thing, regarding those 2 kidnapping cases, I actually found out about them 2 months ago. At that time, I truly couldn't accept reality. But I've worn this police uniform for 6 years, and I know very well that this world isn't a fairy tale paradise of truth, goodness, and beauty, but an arena where black, white, and gray intertwine. Good and evil, sincerity and hypocrisy, scheming and exploitation are actually happening every moment. I understand you didn't intentionally want to harm me, and I can understand your position. And as a police officer, I also have my own stance. Capturing criminals, upholding justice, and protecting lives are the missions I carry on my shoulders. I will not shrink back because of pain, nor will I harbor resentment because of some exploitation. Because I know that there will be shadows under the sun, but what shines on me is always the scorching, warm sunlight. You don't need to feel guilty, because in my heart, I didn't lose my right hand because of you, but for fairness and justice. I caught a criminal who had harmed people, and I protected a victim. You just happened to have an intersection with them, and your starting point was only to seek justice for Serafina Shaw. I can recognize this point, can't you? The last thing is, I want to tell you, I have never hated you. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. Vesper Hawthorne, December 29th, written in North City. From the very first sentence, Preston's tears flowed uncontrollably. By the time he reached the last word, tears had already soaked the entire letter. Suppressed, desperate sobs escaped from his lips and throat, echoing throughout the hospital room. He felt as if his heart had been torn apart, the intense pain traveling along his nerves to his brain, slowly engulfing his consciousness. He pressed the damp letter to his chest, curling up, his fingers digging into his own flesh. Blood seeped out, mixing with tears, blurring the words on the paper. Seeing his agonizing state, Serafina couldn't help but cry too. She took his hand, trying to stop him from hurting himself, but she couldn't pull it away. Watching the wound deepen, she also lost control of her emotions and cried out. It's already over, she has let it go. Why do you keep tormenting yourself? She never hated you. Just consider the past a dream. Now the dream is over, can't we look forward? Preston desperately wanted to listen to her, to forget all of this. But he knew clearly that everything had truly happened. It wasn't a dream. The knife the culprit had plunged into Vesper's hand had, in truth, also pierced his heart. The wound might heal, but the scar would remain forever. Etched in his bones, unforgettable for eternity. Now Vesper was gone. He no longer had the chance to repent, to apologize. The "I'm sorry" he never got to say. It would become a shadow lingering in his heart, haunting him until death. Chapter 12. By the end of February, the weather in Seaside City was gradually warming up. Cassidy Casey Lynch slept until noon, awakened by a series of knocks on the door. She cursed under her breath, got up, shuffled to the door in her slippers, and opened it with an impatient look. Seeing it was 6 Winters, she kicked him squarely in the knee. Banging on the door this early, are you possessed or something? Spit out what you have to say, and don't disturb my sleep. Before boarding the boat, 6 had heard she was at the casino until midnight yesterday. Seeing her displeasure, he quickly put on an obsequious smile and, like offering a treasure, handed over a carton of cigarettes he had bought on the way. How could I dare disturb Boss Casey's sleep if it weren't something important? Mr. K sent me. Said there's a big fish coming in 7 days, wants you to prepare early. Casey's hand, which was unwrapping the cigarettes, paused, and she raised an eyebrow. Big fish, how big? 6 glanced outside the door and made a 6 gesture with his hand. Casey tutted twice, tossed him a pack of cigarettes, then picked up a lighter and lit one for herself. What kind of fish? A basketful, a crateful, or a whale shark? 6 grinned, unwrapped his cigarettes, offered her one, and then diligently lit it for her. Heard this time it's a mermaid. A big shot from across the border specifically requested her. We absolutely have to deliver, Casey squinted, took a couple of drags, and nodded. 6 didn't disturb her further and quickly slipped away. She kicked the door shut, walked to the table, sat down, and placed the cigarettes on the edge. Then she poured out half the water from her glass, dipped her fingertip in it, and drew some water marks on the table. A mermaid? So, a beautiful woman. 60 million USD to kidnap a woman. This person must be hard to get, no powerful connections to threaten, yet famous enough for the gangs across the border to know about her. That could only mean a celebrity. Thinking of this, Casey's heart grew heavy. She perked up her ears, listening to the sounds outside, then pulled out a cigarette pack, picked up the pen on the table, and wrote a line inside the cardboard box. The uncapped pen had dried up from disuse. She shook it but used too much force, aggravating her wound. A burning pain shot through her. She sucked in a sharp breath, taking a long moment to recover before picking up the pen again. 7 days, Mermaid enters the sea. Chapter 13, after writing, she pocketed the cigarettes, got back into bed, and pulled the covers over her head to sleep. When she woke up again, it was already dark. She got up and strolled to the galley. It was past mealtime. The food had all been eaten, leaving only scraps. She cursed a few rascals, then turned and headed towards the bow. As she disembarked, she happened to run into a few of her men who greeted her, asking where she was going. She glared at them and then scolded with a laugh. "A bunch of heartless, gluttonous pigs couldn't even save me some food. All that looking after you lot for nothing." Hearing this, the brothers scratched their heads and chuckled, quickly coming forward to help set up the gangway. Casey didn't hold back either. She took out her cigarette pack, grabbed a handful, and tossed them over, then leisurely strolled towards the small diner in the village. At 8 o'clock, the diner was mostly empty. She ordered a plate of fried rice, then opened her cigarette pack, took out the last cigarette, lit it, and casually tossed the empty pack into the overflowing trash can. 5 or 6 minutes later, the owner brought her food, and while she was at it, she picked up the full trash bag and put in a new one. Casey buried her head in her food, not looking at the diner matron. After a few mouthfuls, she had polished off the rice on her plate, let out a burp, walked to the counter, and tossed down a crumpled $100 bill. The diner matron rummaged in the drawer for a long time before finally scraping together $90 to hand her. She took it, picking her teeth with one hand while kicking at the pebbles underfoot with the other, and headed back to the boat. Just as she stepped onto the deck, she ran into Artie Young. He stood up, offering his chair to Casey, his tone full of ingratiation. "Boss Casey not trying her luck tonight?" Casey sprawled out with a stretch. "Lost my shirt. Where's the money?" Waiting for the higher-ups to send the fish. This meant she barely had enough money left for food. Artie's eyes darted around a few times, then he quickly pulled $2,000 from his pocket and offered it up. Casey squinted at him, not reaching for it. "What's the meaning of this?" "A little something for you, boss. Don't mind it being small, just a few packs of smokes. Nothing much, nothing much," a grin spread across Casey's lips. Only then did she take the money, get up, and pat his shoulder. "You're a smart kid, Artie. Next time there's a fish, I'll let you handle the pickup." Artie's face lit up with joy. He quickly picked up a lantern and walked ahead to light her way. Once back in her room, Casey locked the door, took out the handful of change from her pocket, and then found a small note among it. She studied it under the light for a long while, memorizing the words on the note. Then she crumpled the paper, put it in her mouth, chewed it, and with a grimace, swallowed it down with some water before blowing out the lamp. Soon after, the sounds of several men joking and chatting drifted in from outside the window. She quietly went to the window, opened it a crack, and listened to the commotion outside. "Heard a big fish is coming. How much meat will we get? Think we'll even get the head? With Six and Boss Casey around, you think you'll get the head? Dreaming again, are we? Boss Casey's only been here a month and she gets to share the head meat? We've been here half a year and can't even get an eyeball. There's no justice. What's your status, and what's Boss Casey's? You don't even dare kill a fish. If Boss Casey hears you talking like that, watch out you don't end up in the fish basket." Overhearing them badmouthing her, "Casey, no," Vesper smiled silently. She returned to bed and lay down fully clothed, many memories flashing through her mind. After leaving North City at the end of December, she arrived in Seaside City and underwent half a month of training. During this half-month, she learned about her undercover identity and mission and memorized information about the criminal organization. Operation Seagull was an anti-gang operation launched on the Sino-Suidonian border, targeting the criminal group led by Mr. K. This group had long colluded with gangs in Suidonia, across the sea, profiting from human organ trafficking. They also ran numerous casinos and were involved in various illegal activities, including kidnapping and human trafficking. The persona Vesper was playing, Cassidy Casey Lynch, was the daughter of a lackey who worked for the previous boss of this gang. This lackey was responsible for skippering transport boats, but due to a gambling addiction, had incurred high-interest debts and was cornered at home. His daughter, Casey Lynch, poisoned the water, killing several debt collectors who came to his house. She was caught and imprisoned for over a decade. This lackey died a few years ago while saving Mr. K, still muttering about his daughter in his final moments. A year ago, Casey Lynch died in prison during a conflict with other inmates. The police kept this news from leaking, preserving Casey Lynch's identity, and formulated Operation Seagull based on it. Vesper, with her recently injured hand, similar age, and background of losing her parents young and growing up in an orphanage, fit this persona perfectly in every aspect. She lived up to expectations, passed the training tests, and in mid-January successfully infiltrated the criminal organization. After spending half a month at the headquarters, she gained Mr. K's trust, inherited her father's boat, and became a boat boss. Throughout February, she received 3 secret missions to transport organs across the border, all of which she completed successfully, finally earning the respect of the entire crew. But her identity was, after all, that of a woman under 30. Although everyone was polite to her on the surface, many still grumbled privately. Vesper knew many eyes were watching her, so she dared not make any unusual moves. Today was the first time she had passed intelligence to her downstream contact. If successful, she should be able to save a woman's life. Yet Vesper dared not feel happy, only filled with anxiety. She feared an accident, feared exposing herself and causing the entire plan to fail, leading to the deaths of her 2 colleagues who were also undercover. But fortunately, for now, everything was progressing according to their pre-planned scenario. The waves were high, but she couldn't make for shore. Because a mermaid was about to become prey under the seagull's talons, she had to save this fish. Chapter 14. 2 months had passed since Vesper Hawthorne left North City, but Preston Sterling still hadn't given up searching for her. He went to the Criminal Investigation Department. Her colleagues all said she had resigned and they didn't know where she'd gone. He used his connections to check all air, land, and sea transportation systems, but they all replied that no passenger named Vesper Hawthorne could be found. Apart from colleagues, she didn't associate with outsiders, so there were no close friends to inquire with. Her immediate family members had all passed away, leaving no one to ask. Preston had run to every place he could think of, but still found no news related to her. Over time, alone in the empty bedroom, he became somewhat dazed, starting to doubt whether a person named Vesper Hawthorne even existed in this world. Otherwise, how could a living person just vanish into thin air, her whereabouts unknown? He lifted his sunken, bloodshot eyes and wandered through the rooms, trying to find something related to her. But after rummaging through all the cabinets, boxes, pockets, and corners, he didn't even find a single strand of her hair. All the remaining items in the 4 rooms of the house were his personal belongings. Everything related to Vesper Hawthorne had disappeared, except for the letter on the bedside table. He picked up the crumpled envelope, banished the suspicion from his mind, and comforted himself inwardly. She must have cleared out her things from the house. She was a police officer. Destroying these things would be easy for her. She must still be in North City, just hiding. Maybe one day they would run into each other on the street. Muttering this to himself, he gradually regained some confidence, picked up his phone, and went out, preparing for a chance encounter. North City was still very cold in February. Preston walked alone on the streets for a long time, still with no results. For these 2 months, he had barely eaten or slept, losing a significant amount of weight. His physical condition was not what it used to be, and by evening, he was too tired to lift his feet. He leaned against a flower bed in the square, his mind muddled, gulping down water. After a few sips, his gaze fell on the large screen in the center of the square. On the screen, a press conference was being broadcast. Seeing the familiar, smiling face on the screen, Preston froze. Perhaps he was faint from hunger, or perhaps it was the angle, but for a fleeting moment, he had mistaken the person on the screen for Vesper Hawthorne. But when he saw the scrolling text at the bottom, a list actress Serafina Shaw announces comeback live press conference, he finally came to his senses, silently lowered his head, and dared not look again. Yet Serafina's voice still reached his ears through the speakers overhead. Actually, I had originally planned to announce some very important news at this press conference, but something unexpected happened, so I can only inform everyone later. Remembering the message he received last night, and listening to her regretful tone, his heart was filled with mixed emotions. After Vesper disappeared, Preston became obsessed, his mind solely focused on finding her. Initially, Serafina would accompany him in his search, but as days turned into weeks, she grew tired, had a fight with him, and left. He still remembered her crying hysterically, questioning him why he couldn't let go, asking if he had fallen in love with Vesper Hawthorne. Preston didn't know how to answer her, because even he himself didn't know what his feelings for Vesper truly were. Once, he too thought he was merely using her as a stand-in for Serafina, reminiscing. But only after she completely vanished without a trace did he realize, with a shock, that she had long since become an indispensable part of his life, as important as Serafina. Chapter 15, So Yesterday, when Serafina proactively sent a conciliatory message, stating that if he was willing, she would publicly announce their relationship at tomorrow's press conference. Preston refused her for the first time. Last time, at the hospital, he had said he needed to consider, and now he had considered it. He couldn't agree to her. He couldn't let go of the past and pretend nothing had happened to be with her. Serafina had slept through these 5 years, so she hadn't changed at all. But he was no longer the same person he was 5 years ago. He had consciously designed a trap, in the name of love, dragging the innocent Vesper Hawthorne into it. He was too arrogant, too conceited, thinking everything was under his control, believing he could let her walk away unscathed. But he forgot that, while he was plotting all this, the culprit who had masterminded 2 kidnapping plots might also have been secretly watching him. During the 3 days Vesper was missing, he completely broke down, reaching a point where any unfortunate news would have driven him to suicide. Fortunately, fate showed mercy, giving him a chance to atone. Vesper hadn't died, but her hand was crippled. The hand that, every year before her parents' tombstones, she would raise, vowing to win the Medal of Valor. Crippled by his doing. He was a coward, lacking the courage, the nerve, to visit her by her hospital bed. He didn't know how she would feel if she learned the truth, nor did he know what kind of look she would give him when they met again. He agonized outside her hospital room for half a month, never daring to push open that door. In the end, it was Vesper who proactively opened the door and walked out, looking at him with calm, unwavering eyes, asking where he had been these past few days, his girlfriend injured, and he hadn't come to take care of her. It turned out she didn't know the truth. Realizing this, Preston felt as if he had just been released from the gallows, breaking out in a cold sweat. It was from that moment he vowed to spend his life by her side, to atone for his sins. He thought he could keep his word, but he never anticipated Serafina would wake up. The situation had once again spun out of his control, and while he was still hesitating, Vesper left. Only after seeing the letter she left behind did Preston understand that, as early as 5 years ago, when the thought of using her first crossed his mind, his relationship with Serafina had already ended. He had betrayed Vesper's true feelings. He should spend a lifetime repaying it. Either die or return to Vesper Hawthorne's side. Beyond that, there was no third choice. Whenever these past events came to mind, Preston would get bogged down, unable to extricate himself. So by the time he snapped back to reality, the broadcast on the screen had already ended. He pushed his weak body to stand up, hailed a cab, and was about to give the address when Serafina's call suddenly came through. After a moment's hesitation, he answered it. "Please, can you please not refuse me anymore? Can we talk? I'm waiting for you at the old place. If you don't come, I'll wait here for you. I mean it." She quickly rattled off these few sentences, giving him no chance to speak, and then directly hung up. Preston's head immediately started to throb. He pressed his temples, pondered for a long time, and still decided to go. Half an hour later, the taxi stopped outside a villa halfway up a mountain. He didn't knock, but sent her his location, waiting for her outside the gate. Chapter 16, a few minutes later, the gates of the mountain estate opened. Serafina Shaw came running, crossed the road to his side, her face beaming with a happy smile. "I knew you wouldn't ignore me." A car descended from the mountain, winding its way down the serpentine road. Preston Sterling stepped back a few paces, creating distance between them, his eyes still filled with a deep melancholy. "This is the last time. There won't be a next time, Sierra. After today, let's not see each other again." Hearing this, the smile on Serafina's face slowly faded, replaced by panic. "Please, what nonsense are you talking? Didn't you used to like me the most? I finally woke up. How can you say such things? What I said is all true. Sierra, I used to like you a lot, but as you said, that was in the past. You're still the same you from before, but I'm not the same me anymore. I can't fulfill my promise. Forget me, dance happily, live a good life. After speaking, Preston didn't look at her again and turned to leave. Serafina stared at him in disbelief, followed him, and grabbed his hand, still wanting to hold him back. But he showed no mercy, directly shaking her off and slowly walking down the mountain. Looking at her empty hand, Serafina froze on the spot, large tears welling up in her eyes. Neither of them noticed that the car coming down the mountain was gradually slowing down. Finally, as it passed Serafina, it came to a direct stop. With a heavy thud, the doors opened, and 3 men instantly jumped out, dragging Serafina towards the car. A scream shattered the recently restored quiet. Preston turned at the sound. When he saw 3 masked men grabbing Serafina, his mind exploded. He rushed forward, grabbed the hem of Serafina's dress, and held on tightly. A nearby thug cursed and kicked him. He fell to the ground, left with only torn pieces of her dress. In desperation, he grabbed the leg of the thug nearest to him. At the same time, the villa gates opened, and a dozen bodyguards rushed out. Seeing the situation turn unfavorable, the 3 thugs exchanged a look, pushed Serafina to the side of the road, and were about to get into the car to escape. But Preston refused to let go, using all his strength to hold onto the thug's leg. Seeing the bodyguards only 4 or 5 meters away, in their desperation, the 3 thugs directly lifted him into the car. Then they slammed the door shut and floored the accelerator. Preston seemed to have lost his sanity, his fingers digging into the thug, making him scream. A thug beside him, seeing he still wouldn't stop, hardened his heart, picked up a club from the car, and smashed it against the back of Preston's head. After a muffled groan, Preston lost consciousness. Blood gushed from the back of his head, quickly soaking the thug's pants. The thug driving heard the sound, glanced back, and said in a harsh tone, "You didn't kill him, did you?" The 2 thugs in the back seat looked at each other, not daring to speak. This silence made the thug in the front seat sigh heavily. He slammed the steering wheel a few times, his voice laced with a desperate ruthlessness. "We can't report back if we've alerted them. We can't take the fall for this. Let this kid take it," the other 2 thugs, hearing this, chimed in. "Sounds good to me. If it weren't for him messing things up, we would have succeeded long ago. I'd like to see if his heart, liver, and spleen are really worth 60 million. Chapter 17, the day before setting sail. 6. Winters sauntered onto the boat again, carrying a few packs of beetle nuts. Cassidy Casey Lynch was lounging in the sun. Seeing him arrive, she quickly had someone bring over a chair. Well, a rare guest. What brings you to my humble abode today?" 6, with a sour face, waved his hand and sat down. "Don't even mention it, Boss Casey. That fish we were supposed to net, it got away." Casey shot up, yanking off her sunglasses, her eyes wide with shock. "Got away? That was 60 million just like that? I was waiting to get a piece of that to pay off my gambling debts over there. A bunch of incompetents, can't even catch one woman. Mr. K is furious too. That's why he sent me to let you know." The money they'd almost had slipped through their fingers. Neither of them was happy, and they parted ways after a few short words. Casey picked up her fishing rod, went to the shore, baited the hook, cast it out, and sat for a long time without catching anything. 2 16 or 17-year-old punks watched from the beach for a while, then yelled out, "Boss Casey, caught anything?" "Caught jack shit." Hearing this, the men on her boat knew she was in a bad mood and all started to console her. "It's all right, Boss Casey. Fish will bite eventually, just wait a bit longer," the punks below roared with laughter. Casey glared at them, then took off her slipper and threw it at them. The 2 ran off, laughing, and gradually disappeared from sight. Casey lost her mood for fishing, dropped the rod, and went back to her room to sleep. She slept until 1 o'clock the next morning. She opened her eyes, listening to the sound of the waves crashing outside, and sat up, hugging her blanket tightly. Although she didn't know why that mermaid hadn't taken the bait, the latest intelligence had already been passed on. The rescue operation would be canceled, and no innocent people would be harmed. Thinking of this, her heart finally settled a little. They weren't sailing the next day, and 6 ambled over again. "Boss, pack up, get ready to set sail." Hearing this, Casey's heart leaped, but she maintained a calm expression, squinting at him and scolding with a laugh. The fish already got away and we're still sailing. Are you messing with me, kiddo? Six squatted beside her, chuckled a few times, and lowered his voice. The big fish got away, but two small ones came along, enough for a snack. Casey's hand, hidden in her sleeve, clenched into a fist. She tried to subtly fish for information. Small fish, 2 of them. What's their deal? How much are they worth? Six scratched his head, took out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then held it up to her. This chick is the big fish we were supposed to catch. Heard they actually got her, but some guy messed it up. The guys below were afraid they couldn't deliver, so they grabbed this guy to take the fall. Mr. K said to send him across with that runt who caused trouble a while back. Let's get to work, they're bringing them down now. Looking at the familiar face on the phone, Casey bit her lip hard to control her expression. Only now, through this photo, did she realize that the mermaid Six had been talking about was Serafina Shaw. Then the man who was caught, a bad premonition suddenly rose in her heart. She pushed herself up from the chair, about to stand. Just as she got up, several of her men escorted 2 badly beaten and bruised individuals onto the boat. The moment she saw the man in the lead, dressed in a suit, Casey felt her blood run cold, her mind completely blank. At the same time, the man lifted his blood-stained face. Those weary, aged eyes, upon seeing her, widened abruptly, almost popping out of their sockets as he screamed hoarsely. "Vesper, how could you?" Chapter 18. Before he could finish, Casey Lynch kneed him sharply in the chin several times. The surrounding brothers stared, dumbfounded by her actions. Six Winters also looked at her with astonishment. "Boss Casey, what are you doing?" Casey's mind raced. She narrowed her eyes, looking into the distance, her voice laced with ruthlessness. "There have been a lot of new faces around lately, probably watching us. This kid's got a loose tongue, afraid he'll cause trouble." Hearing this, the brothers all turned their heads to look into the distance and indeed saw a few unfamiliar boats. They quickly tore a piece of cloth and stuffed it into his mouth. Six nodded in agreement, waving for his men to quickly lock the person in the cabin. Casey let out a small sigh of relief, took out a cigarette, lit it, and frowned. This kid's clothes don't look like he's an ordinary person. Sending him across, will there be trouble? Six also took a cigarette and borrowed a light, his tone slightly more relaxed. "It's fine," Mr. K checked. "He's a friend of that big fish. His family has some money, but it won't affect us. 60 million went down the drain because of him. If we don't make him pay a price, how can that be right?" Casey had already guessed the gist of the situation. But now that the person was on board, according to the rules, the boat was about to set sail. She had no way to get this information out. These were 2 living human lives. Her heart sank to the bottom as she desperately tried to think of a solution. This kid let that little starlet escape, and he's her friend. Six, do you think these incompetent fools might have slipped up with people following them? Six flicked his cigarette ash, leaned close to her ear, and whispered. Mr. K is worried about that too. That's why they were sent over as soon as they arrived, afraid the police might be following. Let's set sail quickly. This hot potato needs to be sent off immediately. Otherwise, we and this whole boatload of brothers might be in deep trouble. With things said to this extent, Casey could only order the boat to set sail. After a few blasts of the horn, the fishing boat docked at the harbor sailed out to sea. After sailing for half an hour, seeing no boats following, Six finally relaxed, smiling and chatting with Casey. What was that kid yelling just now? Didn't hear clearly. Hearing this, Casey's already tangled heart became even more chaotic. She didn't speak. Artie Young, beside them, eager to please Six, chimed in. Seemed like he shouted Vesper, right, Boss Casey? Six followed up, looking at her, and drawled, "Oh." Casey's body tensed instantly. She shot them both a sidelong glance. What nonsense was he yelling? How would I remember? What oh? Six threw down his cigarette butt and pulled out his phone again, handing it over. Artie, isn't that the fish he saved? Look, Serafina Shaw. Sierra, calling her so intimately, probably an old flame. Artie also leaned in, glanced at the photo, then suddenly turned his gaze to Casey's face and exclaimed, "Hey, this little starlet looks a lot like you. Boss Casey, no wonder that kid suddenly yelled, probably mistook you for her." Six also looked up, his eyes darting between the phone and her face, a look of amazement spreading across his features. "She does a bit. Boss Casey, did you get plastic surgery to look like this starlet?" Hearing the two of them, Casey's heart sank, then rose, then sank again. Only when she saw Six's teasing smile did she confirm that they probably hadn't found out her true identity. She forced a smile, lifted her leg, and kicked each of them. Her voice was tinged with annoyance. "Surgery for what? Your sister here was born a beauty. That little starlet probably got surgery to look like me." "True, true. Our boss Casey sends any spare cash straight to the casino. Where would she find the time or money for that? But boss, since you and this starlet look so much alike, why don't you sell your charms, find a way to get that 60 million, and we three can split it on the quiet?" Casey knew these two rascals were joking. She picked up her slipper and smacked each of them a few times. "You don't know what kind of place that is over there. Get 60 million? You think it's like fishing. You trying to get your sister killed so you can take over, huh?" The two of them ran into the boat, shielding their heads and begging for mercy. "Boss, we were wrong, ouch, go easy." Chapter 19. After dinner, Casey, Lynch yawned and returned to her room. Once the door was locked, the smile on her face instantly vanished, replaced by a solemn expression. She dipped her hand in some water and briefly wrote down the day's events on the table. Things had become very tricky. With Preston Sterling captured on the boat, it wasn't just about two lives anymore. It also implicated the entire undercover operation codenamed Operation Seagull. If he said anything, she risked exposure at any moment. So the most urgent thing now was to find a way to see him and make him keep his mouth shut. Late at night, Casey, pretending to have just woken up, carried a lantern and patrolled the cabins. Whenever they set sail, she would almost always get up to patrol at night, and the brothers on watch duty were used to it. After wandering from the bow to the stern, she looked around, then stooped and entered the hold. As soon as she entered, she tossed a pack of cigarettes to the guard, telling him to stay alert. Then she took the keys, opened the door, first checked on the kid, and only then went to the corner. She had just squatted down when Preston opened his eyes and stared intently at her. She sneered, extended her right hand, and lifted his bruised chin, tutting in exclamation. "Not sleeping this late at night? What are you looking at? Keep staring and I'll gouge your eyes out." In this gloomy makeshift cell, her low voice was exceptionally chilling. But Preston showed no fear, his gaze fixed unwaveringly on her wrist. She stared at him meaningfully for a long while. Only when he nodded slightly did she finally stand up and call the lackey outside. "These two are fresh goods. The stuff in their bellies can bait fish. You check them again and make sure their mouths are sealed tight." After giving her orders, she swaggered upstairs without looking back. Once she left, the lackey, who had been bowing and scraping a moment before, didn't bother checking and directly blew out the lamp and lay down. The hold returned to darkness. Preston's eyes, however, stared blankly in the direction she had left, tears welling up. He had overheard a lot these past few days and knew he had likely been kidnapped by a criminal organization, but he hadn't expected to run into Vesper Hawthorne here. Although she had dyed her hair blonde, wore ragged clothes, and her face was thin and several shades darker, he recognized her at a glance. He had blurted out her name instinctively, only to receive a beating. In that instant, he understood why she was here. She hadn't resigned. She had accepted an undercover assignment and infiltrated this criminal group. All night, he replayed all the events that had occurred before she left. Her birthday wish, those missing items, the special trip to the cemetery the day before she left. It turned out everything had been traceable. He just hadn't noticed. And her deliberate visit tonight was also to let him confirm her identity. He would never forget the scar on her hand for the rest of his life. And he understood the words she had said before leaving. He had likely been kidnapped by an organ trafficking organization and was about to be sent abroad to be brutally killed. She wanted him to stay quiet and not expose her identity. He could do that, but his heart couldn't stop pounding wildly. For her. Chapter 20, the boat had been sailing on the sea for 2 days and 1 night. Dawn would bring them to Swedonia. Casey, Lynch still hadn't found a way to save them. All night, she considered many plans, but all were ultimately rejected. Just as the sky began to show the first light of dawn, a commotion suddenly erupted outside the cabin. Realizing something must have happened, she quickly got up and ran out. As soon as she stepped out, she bumped into a panicked Artie Young, who stammered out the cause of the incident. Boss, that kid." While the night watchman was in the latrine, he broke free from his ropes and jumped out the window. "The kid. What about Preston Sterling?" Casey's heart leaped into her throat. She squeezed through the crowd onto the deck and immediately saw Preston being held down by several men. Her suspended heart settled back down. She turned and walked over to 6, Winters, who was furiously slapping the night watchman. After he had vented his anger, she handed him a cigarette, looked down at the lackey whose face was swollen, and spoke with a cold tone. "How long was he gone before you noticed?" 5 or 6 minutes. Casey's face instantly turned incredibly grim. About 10 minutes later, a clamor of voices came from the stern. Several soaked lackeys dragged the kid ashore. "Boss Casey, 6, the person drowned." The two exchanged a look, both seeing the despair of a failed task on each other's faces. When the cold body was dragged over, an enraged 6 could no longer hold back and viciously stomped on the corpse several times. "Damn it, the person's dead. How are we going to explain this to Mr. K? This 3 million, are you bastards going to pay for it?" At the mention of money, all the lackeys on deck immediately lowered their heads, not daring to breathe. Casey's mind raced. She suddenly remembered what 6 had said during dinner yesterday. Her eyes lit up, an idea came to her, and she turned to discuss it with 6. "Well, he's dead, nothing we can do. First, let's salvage what's still usable and preserve it. Cut our losses as much as possible." At this point, this was the only option. 6 waved his hand, calling his men over to deal with the body. Soon, the person responsible for dissection appeared with a knife. People nearby quickly made way, bringing over a sealed toolbox. With one cut, the smell of blood instantly filled the entire deck. Everyone present averted their eyes, unable to look at the horrifying scene. Preston merely glanced at it and immediately started vomiting uncontrollably. Casey looked at the bile he was bringing up, raised an eyebrow, and pulled 6 to sit down. "Should be able to salvage about 100,000. "What damn use is 100,000? The debt you owe at the casino is more than that, isn't it?" That was indeed true. Casey awkwardly rubbed her nose and quickly tried to recover. "How about we delay it for a few days? Wait until last month's pay comes in, and we can pool it together." At the mention of this, 6 became even angrier and started cursing on the spot. "Then there's no need to wait. The last batch of goods was delivered. But the money hasn't come through, yet those damn Swedonians, insisting the delivered goods don't match the contract, and they're still defaulting on the payment." This criminal organization, although engaged in illicit activities, presented itself as a fishing company on the surface. They smuggled organs under the guise of selling fish, secretly swapping them out. And the contract signed with the Swedonian side was a commercial contract that had to go through legal procedures. Casey had heard yesterday that this contract was in trouble, and today the goods in her hands were also in trouble. She immediately thought of a way that might save Preston. Seeing 6 take the bait, Casey glanced sideways at Preston and sure enough saw him covering his mouth. She slowly got up, walked over to the corpse, her voice full of surprise. "The contract is in trouble. Then why not just find a lawyer to look at it?" "Lawyer? What lawyer would dare take our case? You think Mr. K hasn't looked? It's because he couldn't find one that he was planning to swallow his pride and take the loss, isn't it?" Hearing this, Casey quickly put on an indignant expression and kicked the recently severed arm at her feet right in front of Preston. "Then what the hell are we going to do? The casino is still pressing me for money." Chapter 21. This bloody, severed limb suddenly appeared before him. Preston Sterling, terrified, jerked his head up and met Casey, Lynch's meaningful gaze. He shivered, instantly understanding her intention, and struggled to get up, screaming. "6, Boss 6, I'm a lawyer. I can help you see what's wrong with the contract. 6, give me a chance to live." Hearing this, 6, Winters stood up, walked over to him, stared at him for a long while, then hesitantly spoke. "You're a lawyer. Do you have a license? You're not trying to fool me, are you?" Seeing the fish take the bait, Casey quickly interjected, setting the stage. "Look at him. Does he look like he has a license? 6, don't act rashly out of desperation for this 3 million. If you bring a fraud to Mr. K, we'll be even more finished." Preston understood the meaning behind her words and directly hugged 6's leg. "Boss 6, I really am a lawyer. You can check online. Sterling Associates Law Firm, Preston Sterling. You can find me." 6 scratched his nose, slowly took out his phone, searched for a bit, and a smile gradually spread across his face. He waved his hand, called someone to take Preston away, then pulled Casey to a secluded spot to discuss. How about I send Mr. K a message and mention it? See what he thinks. If we can save that $400 million contract, never mind a dead $3 million fish, even that $60 million mermaid that got away wouldn't be a big deal. Casey knew his suspicious nature and didn't push it, instead playing devil's advocate. What if this kid is tricking us or can't find any loopholes in the contract? Won't Mr. K still hold us accountable? I think it's better to just tell the truth. It's only $3 million, grit our teeth, and we can make it up in half a year. Six was a greedy man. Hearing half a year, his eyes widened, and he became even more eager to try. He persuaded her for a long time before Casey reluctantly agreed, telling him to send a message and ask. A dozen minutes later, Mr. K replied, telling them to return immediately and bring the person over. Six was overjoyed, slapping Casey's back hard a few times, his voice unable to hide his laughter. I told you it would work. Looking at this kid's appearance, he's probably really capable. Just you wait and see. The sun rose from the sea horizon. The boat, which had been drifting at sea for 3 days, turned back before even reaching shore. Casey's heart finally settled. 3 days later, the boat returned to Seaside City. Six, along with a few of his men, escorted Preston off the boat. Casey stood at the bow, watching their retreating figures, her eyes lowered to hide the complex emotions within. She had done her best. Now it was up to Preston's own luck. She had no time to worry about him further. She turned and went back to her room, wrote down the events of the past few days clearly, and, avoiding people, delivered it to her downstream contact. That evening, Six's call came. Just hearing his tone, Casey knew things had probably worked out. Boss Casey, this kid is really something. He found the loopholes after just a few reads. Mr. K is very happy and decided to spare his life. Pay will be issued in a few days. See you at the old place then. Only then did Casey completely relax. And as Six had said, 7 days later, 200,000 USD was deposited into her account. She withdrew it all, then went to the underground casino. First paid off the 100-odd thousand she owed, and then entered a private room. As soon as she entered, Six greeted her with a wine glass, beaming, wanting to toast her. She downed it in one gulp. He shouted impressive, then pulled the person behind him forward, wanting him to toast her as well. Looking at Preston's face, his wounds already treated, Casey didn't accept his drink. She leaned back into the sofa behind her and raised an eyebrow at Six. Why is he here? What's the meaning of this? Six knew she was displeased. He waved Preston out of the room, then sat down beside her and explained. It's Mr. K's idea. He's not comfortable leaving a new face around him, so he asked me to find a place to settle him. I thought, since he was taken from your place, I'd send him back the same way. Besides, doesn't this kid like that little starlet? Boss Casey, you look like that starlet. If he stays with you, he definitely won't want to run off. How convenient is that? Help me look after him, do a brother a favor. Chapter 22. Cassidy, Casey. Lynch knew Preston Sterling was an unpredictable time bomb, and she truly wasn't comfortable letting him fall into someone else's hands. But to avoid suspicion, she still made a few excuses before reluctantly agreeing. 6. Winters, afraid she would go back on her word, finished his gambling and quickly saw her out. She didn't look at Preston, just beckoned with her hand and went downstairs. After leaving the casino, the two of them hailed a cab back to the small fishing village. Seeing no one was following, Preston turned his head and started to call out, "Vess!" Before the purr could escape his lips, Casey slapped him across the face with her left hand, then sneered at his shocked expression. "Didn't Six teach you the rules? Don't think just because he sent you here, I wouldn't dare touch you. If you don't know your place, I'll still kick you into the sea to feed the sharks." Her words were laced with warnings and threats. Preston knew she was reminding him that there were people watching. He glanced at the driver, didn't dare to speak, just said understood, and lowered his head. Back on the boat, she led him into a cabin, then took a key from her waist and opened the door to the room opposite hers. "You'll live here from now on. Be smart about what you should and shouldn't say. If you want to die, go ahead, but don't drag me down with you." From the day he was kidnapped, for a full 18 days, Preston hadn't had a single good night's sleep. On his first night on the fishing boat, he could finally close his eyes in peace. The next day, he was awakened by a knock on the door. A sharp-featured man named Artie Young stood at the door, sizing him up for a good while before speaking. Boss Casey said you'll be with me from now on. Come on, I'll show you around and get you familiar with the place. Preston knew that Casey Lynch was Vesper Hawthorne's undercover name. He had witnessed the ruthlessness of this organization when he met Mr. K and understood he was living on a knife's edge. He was terrified, yet he never thought of escaping. As long as he could stay by Vesper's side, he was willing to go through fire and water with her. He knew she was doing this for the Medal of Valor, for fairness and justice, to serve her country, dancing with wolves. And he was only doing it for her. For the next few days, Preston followed Artie around, gradually getting to know the people on the boat. But he hadn't seen Casey at all, which made him a little worried. He found an opportunity to ask Artie, "Brother Artie, why haven't I seen Boss Casey around?" Artie pursed his lips, his tone gloomy. "Just got paid, of course the boss went to try her luck. You're new, don't know the rules. Stop asking about these things." Preston knew this Artie was a small-time bully, just trying to scare him. He quickly offered him a cigarette, lit it for him, and said some flattering words before finally getting some information about Casey from him. After asking too many questions, Artie also sensed something was wrong and stared at him for a long time. "You're asking so much, what's your game? Boss Casey might look like your old flame, that starlet, but I'm warning you, she's had blood on her hands since she was 14 or 15. She's ruthless. If you dare get any ideas about her, be careful you don't see tomorrow's sun." Just as he finished speaking, Casey walked in, sporting 2 dark circles under her eyes, and kicked him in the butt. "What crap are you spouting about me now, Artie? If you've got nothing better to do, get down there and move some boxes of fish." Artie hadn't expected to be caught red-handed and scrambled out of the room. Casey watched him scurry off, then turned her head and saw Preston staring at her. She snorted. "What are you looking at? You get down there too, no work, no food." Chapter 23. For the following month, the boat remained docked at the harbor with no activity. However, 6 Winters would visit every few days, though not to see Casey, Lynch, but Preston Sterling. After the $400 million contract was resolved, Mr. K was very pleased and satisfied. Having learned his lesson, thereafter, whenever there was business, he would have 6 bring Preston over to thoroughly review the contracts. The people on the boat were adept at seeing which way the wind blew. Knowing Preston was now a favorite of Mr. K, they all changed their previous attitudes, even starting to call him Brother Prees. Only Casey still ordered him around as usual, giving him no face at all. He had no complaints, doing whatever she instructed, very obediently. With no work for a long time, the men below grew restless, overtly and covertly urging Casey to find out what was going on. She also owed a mountain of debt at the casino, so she found an opportunity to pry information from 6. "It's been so long without any jobs, the brothers are all getting antsy. What's the situation up top?" 6 glanced around, then leaned close to her ear. "Don't worry, just wait a few more days. There's a net full of live ones coming. Enough for you to gamble away for 7 days and 7 nights. Hearing this, Casey's heart began to race uncontrollably. A net full of live fish that meant dozens of living human lives. She was extremely nervous, quickly flexing her hands to suppress the shock in her heart. "Then I'll wait for your word. Make it quick, or Boss Zhang will really chop off my hand." 6 knew she had lost a lot recently and patted her shoulder to reassure her. After seeing him off, Casey returned to her room and recorded the intelligence she had gathered. Then she borrowed another $20,000 from Artie Young and, holding the money, pretended to be heading to the casino. While waiting for a car, she went into the small shop at the village entrance, bought a pack of cigarettes, and handed over a large handful of change. The shopkeeper counted it, gave her back $5. She took it, turned around, and bumped right into Preston. The moment she saw him, her mind seemed to freeze. She walked over to him, her eyes narrowed, her voice laced with aggression. "You dare follow me?" Preston handed her the conch shell in his hand and explained in a low voice. "There's trouble on the boat. Artie is looking for you. I managed to send him away to come over." Casey looked at him skeptically, took the conch shell, and turned back towards the sea. It turned out a few mischievous kids had sneaked onto the boat and been caught. Their parents had come over and were causing a scene. She didn't want any more trouble, so she let the people go and apologized, finally calming the situation. Early the next morning, 6 came again and took Preston away. This time, he was gone for a long time, not returning until late on the third night. Casey was dozing in bed when a knock suddenly came at the door. She got up and opened it. Seeing it was Preston, her brow immediately furrowed. "I'm sleeping. What are you making such a racket for?" Preston glanced at the few men smoking by the staircase and controlled his volume. "Six asked me to bring you a message." Hearing this, the smoking men consciously moved away. Casey stared at him for a long moment before letting him in. As soon as the door was locked, he was about to speak when she quickly tapped the table, pointing at a teacup. Preston was stunned for a moment before understanding. He quickly followed her to sit down, dipped his finger in some water, and wrote a 5 on the table. Six said, 5 days later, this large batch of goods, they needed it so urgently. Casey was pondering this when Preston wrote another line on the table. "I've figured out where their base is in the mountains." Seeing these words, Casey looked sharply at him, her eyes becoming incredibly intense. He lifted his sleeve, wiped away the water, and continued writing. "These past few times, when they weren't paying attention, I managed to remove my blindfold twice on the way into the mountains and saw some landmarks." Chapter 24, the reason this group had become such a thorn in the police's side was because they hid deep within a vast mountain range, making their base difficult to locate. And the reason Casey, Lynch had infiltrated here was, firstly, to rescue kidnapped individuals, and secondly, to gather information about the criminal group's main hideout. But she had only been inside once. After that, she had remained by the sea, and Mr. K had always used Winters as a single point of contact with her. Finding the hideout's location had become almost an obsession for her over these past few months. She knew that if they couldn't wipe them out in one go, the group would have a chance to resurface, which would also mean Operation Seagull would be declared a failure. And the longer an undercover agent remained embedded, the higher the probability of being discovered. She wasn't afraid of death, but she couldn't disregard the lives of her 2 colleagues. So, upon receiving this crucial piece of intelligence from Preston Sterling, her eyes instantly lit up. "Can you draw it?" Seeing Preston nod, she got up, went to the wardrobe, found an empty cigarette carton, tore it open, and handed him the pen. It took him about 10 minutes to draw the map. Looking at the clearly marked landmarks on it, Casey felt as if her heart was about to take flight. She carefully folded the piece of cardboard and tucked it into the cigarette carton. She planned to send it out first thing tomorrow morning, but things took an unexpected turn. Early the next morning, Six arrived at the boat with 6 or 7 of his men. He gathered everyone together and announced that the entire boat was under lockdown. Until they set sail, no one was allowed to disembark. Casey's hand, tucked in her pocket, trembled slightly, but she knew this was a critical moment and she couldn't act rashly. So, she suppressed her emotions and called a few men to help seal the exits. The suddenness of the event caught the men below unprepared, leading to considerable grumbling. A few troublemakers even clashed with Six's men in an attempt to get off the boat. She had to coax and persuade them at length to calm them down. 4 days passed. With the scheduled departure time fast approaching, Casey still hadn't found a suitable opportunity to send out the intelligence that could bring Operation Seagull to a close. She had only 1 night left to devise a plan. Around midnight, just as she was consumed with anxiety, there was a knock on her door. Opening it to see Preston, she grew even more irritated and berated him in front of several men. "What the hell are you doing this late at night? It's bad enough I haven't had a smoke these past 2 days, now I can't even sleep properly. Are you looking for a scolding, you bastard?" Hearing this, Preston offered her a cigarette. She didn't even look at it and threw it back at him. "Trying to fob me off with this cheap crap? Get lost." Preston picked up the cigarette, took a few steps forward, and stubbornly pried open her pocket, stuffing it inside. Casey's heart skipped a beat, because as he stuffed the cigarette in, he had slipped another cigarette carton into her sleeve. But with a group of people watching outside, she couldn't retrieve it, only able to watch helplessly as he stepped back a few paces and winked at her. "Smoke this for now, it'll be over in a few days." She took a deep breath, took out the cigarette, snapped it in half, and showed a disdainful expression. "I don't need you to suck up to me." He didn't respond to that, just nodded in acknowledgement, then turned and left with a few men. Watching his figure disappear through the doorway, Casey's right eyelid twitched violently. She knew something was definitely going to happen tonight. Chapter 25. At 4 in the morning, a flurry of chaotic footsteps sounded outside. The commotion left Casey, Lynch feeling deeply unsettled. About 10 minutes later, a heavy knock came at her door. She waited a moment before sluggishly getting out of bed, rubbing her eyes as she opened the door. The words, "What in the middle of the night?" hadn't even left her lips when she saw 6, Winter's ashen face, and quickly swallowed her words. "3 of your men disobeyed orders and snuck out." Casey's face darkened as well. She pushed through the crowd at the doorway and headed towards the bow. The deck was brightly lit, clearly illuminating the 3 men kneeling on the ground. She immediately spotted Preston Sterling kneeling in the middle, her heart pounding like a drum. Hearing the sound, Preston also looked up and gave her a deep look. Casey understood his meaning. The message had been delivered. 6 paced over to her side, coldly questioning why they had snuck out. One of them, bolder than the others, said he was tired of being cooped up, had no cigarettes, and just wanted to go out for some air. Hearing this ridiculous reason, 6 almost laughed in anger. "You bastards think you'll die if you don't smoke for a few days. I said no, one leaves the boat, are you looking to die?" He was clearly scolding them, but his gaze was fixed directly on Casey. Casey knew he wanted her to give an explanation. She glanced at the 3 men, hardened her heart, and directly took the gun from 6's pocket. 6 didn't stop her. He watched as she fumbled to release the safety, raised the gun with her injured right hand, trembling, aimed at one of them, and pulled the trigger. There was only 1 bullet in the gun. It hit the leftmost man in the shoulder. It was a minor wound, but it sent a cold sweat down everyone present. 6 was also stunned, not expecting her to be so ruthless. He quickly snatched the gun away, glanced towards the shore several times, and muttered, "For God's sake, Grandma, you actually fired. If you attract the police, we'll all end up in jail, won't we?" Casey looked at him with eyes full of frost, her tone extremely cold. "My men made a mistake, so naturally I have to give Boss 6 an explanation. It's just that my hand is crippled, so I missed. If Boss 6 isn't satisfied, he can do it himself." 6 knew she was a ruthless person and didn't want to make things too tense. But to make an example of them, letting them off lightly was also impossible. So he pulled a knife from his belt, tossed it to a nearby brother, and announced the punishment with a smile. "Since these 3 don't use their ears, let's cut off 1 ear from each of them. It'll serve as a reminder to everyone to watch and listen carefully in the future." As his words fell, the entire boat fell silent. The man who received the knife didn't hesitate, unsheathed it, and slowly walked towards the 3 men. Casey was powerless to stop it and couldn't bear to watch any longer. She turned around, forcing herself to stay upright, and walked step by step towards the cabin. Late at night, a few agonizing screams startled the morning roosters in the seaside village. Another day dawned. The original departure time was 7 in the morning, but by 6 o'clock, Casey still hadn't seen the shipment arrive on board. She didn't know what had gone wrong, but at this juncture, she didn't dare to inquire further. She waited in her room until 6:40, when 6 came knocking, telling her to set sail now. She asked nothing, walked into the wheelhouse, and gave a few instructions. For the next 2 days, she didn't even leave her room, staying alone with even her meals brought to her. On the 3rd morning, at dawn, 6 came in with a bottle of liquor to apologize and offer an explanation. She naturally gave him an out, drank his liquor, and managed to extract a few more words from him. It turned out that because this shipment was too large, the higher-ups had decided to dispatch it on several boats in succession. Because her boat had encountered trouble before departure, Mr. K, upon learning this, had moved their cargo onto the other boats. As a precaution, the cargo-carrying boats would depart a day later, while they would still set sail at the originally scheduled time to scout the situation ahead. Chapter 26. These unknown developments didn't worry Casey Lynch, because she had already reported this smuggling route to the organization after her last voyage. Now that the most crucial intelligence had also been sent out, Operation Seagull could finally be concluded. These variables couldn't affect the overall situation. They might even save the lives of those dozens of people. Sailing a day later gave the police more time for rescue. Everything was about to end. Thinking this, Casey smiled softly and fell into a peaceful sleep. When she woke again, it was already 5 in the morning. She pushed open the window, looked at the gradually brightening sky, threw on a jacket, and walked onto the deck. The sea breeze tousled her hair. She didn't bother with it, leaning against the railing, gazing at the sea horizon in a daze. Not long after, Preston Sterling, his head still wrapped in bandages, walked over to her side. She didn't look at him, only asked softly, "Does it still hurt?" Preston didn't answer her, merely looking at the scar on her wrist through the dim light. The two of them stood there quietly until the fiery red sun rose. Only then did he finally speak. "It's about to end, isn't it?" Casey also said nothing, but a heartfelt smile bloomed on her face. Preston smiled along with her. Footsteps sounded from behind. Someone was coming. The two of them turned in unison and walked towards the stern. Preston looked at the lighthouse in the distance, his voice tinged with a hint of anticipation. "Any plans for the future?" Casey, her hands behind her back, her voice full of relief. "Wash my hands of this, find a small fishing village, and live out my twilight years in peace." Preston's words, "Can I be your neighbor?" had just reached his lips when he stopped, because he saw, in the direction of the lighthouse, several naval vessels approaching, red flags fluttering above them. This was Suidonian waters. To see these ships meant that everything had been settled. He looked at the person beside him, his eyes wide with shock, but only saw tears in her eyes. Casey no, Vesper Hawthorne faced the flag, as fiery red as the morning sun, and raised her maimed right hand in a salute. Preston's heart jolted violently. He was about to speak when he heard screams from the cabin. "Police trouble 6. Damn it, there's a mole." Vesper naturally heard these sounds too. She and Preston exchanged a look, their gazes simultaneously falling on the life raft nearby. The boat was now in chaos. They still had time, so they worked together to push the small boat into the sea. After the escape ladder was released, Vesper pushed Preston, urging him to go down first. He, of course, refused, looking at her steadily with those dark eyes, his tone exceptionally firm. "Your hand is injured. You go down first and control the life raft. I can swim. I'll jump in later. It'll save a lot of time." Time was pressing. Vesper knew his suggestion was the best option, so she climbed down the ladder first. After she landed safely on the life raft, she quickly looked up, but her pupils dilated abruptly at the sight above. Preston had already climbed halfway out but was grabbed by Artie Young and dragged back. The two of them wrestled. Artie was thin and no match for him. In desperation, he yelled at the top of his lungs. 6. Preston Sterling took the life raft and is trying to escape. As soon as his words fell, a large group of people rushed towards the stern. Preston's heart suddenly became chaotic. His strength wavered, and Artie broke free. He pulled out the knife at his waist and lunged at Preston's leg. Preston let out a muffled groan, then, with all his might, swung his arm and knocked Artie away. He pulled out the knife embedded in his leg, listened to the increasingly urgent footsteps, and turned his body. With that knife, stained with his blood, sharp enough to cut through iron, he severed the rope ladder. With a swish, the 10-meter-long rope ladder fell into the sea. Without anything to hold onto, the life raft was tossed by the waves and blown by the wind, drifting further away. Vesper didn't know what had happened on the boat. She only saw Preston, far away, waving at her. She gripped the rope in her hand tightly, but couldn't control the raft's direction, only able to watch as the iron fishing boat grew smaller and smaller in the distance. The sound of the waves drowned out all other noises. She couldn't hear anything. She only felt something rising from her chest, spreading to her limbs, consuming her last shred of sanity. It wasn't until the booming sound of a military bugle came from above that she suddenly awoke, looked up, and saw the bright red flag. The next second, a deafening explosion roared from far, far away. She turned around and saw a blazing fire erupting on the sea surface. It was a boat, self-immolating, vying in brilliance with the vast expanse of the sunset-hued sky. From a distance, it looked very much like a lit lighthouse. Chapter 27, when Operation Seagull was made public, summer had already arrived in North City. Serafina Shaw stared blankly as she finished watching the news report, then lowered her head, clutching the bouquet of lilies in her hands. Tears, like morning dewdrops, rolled down the white petals. After an unknown amount of time, the driver stopped the car and opened the door. "Miss, we've arrived." Only then did she wipe away her tears, put on her sunglasses, and get out of the car. It was the weekend, and many people were visiting the cemetery. She avoided the crowds and walked towards the deeper part, stopping under a pine tree. Looking at the smiling photo on the tombstone, the tears she had just managed to stop welled up again. She remembered Preston Sterling telling her when they were children that the thing he feared most was her crying. She quickly bit her lip, forcibly swallowing the sourness in her nose. She bent down, about to place the flowers in her hand, but saw that a bouquet of white daisies had already been placed there. Serafina realized something and looked around. She scanned the area for a long time but saw no suspicious individuals, then finally retracted her gaze. After carefully placing the lilies next to the daisies, she clasped her hands to her chest, closed her eyes, and spoke many, many words in her heart. "Please, my first performance after my comeback is tomorrow. If you knew, would you be very happy? Uncle and Aunt Sterling know everything you did. They are very proud of you. I will take good care of them for you, so don't worry. I will remember your words, dance well, and live well. Don't worry about me. She came to see you too, you probably know, right? Did she tell you she received the Medal of Valor? You would be happy for her too, wouldn't you?" After the autumn equinox, the weather gradually turned cooler. After dinner, Vesper Hawthorne put on her jacket and slowly walked along the stone path towards the small hill. The autumn wind tousled her recently shortened hair, brushing against her neck, tickling her. She reached up to smooth it, looked at the brilliant sunset clouds in the sky, and a memory from long ago suddenly flashed through her mind. Back then, she wasn't just a junior officer at the police station, but the most decorated outstanding member of the Criminal Investigation Department. She also had a boyfriend, a lawyer, who would wait for her at the entrance of her workplace every day to go home together. After dinner, they would also walk along the road, watching the colorful autumn leaves together, talking about many dreams for the future. She smiled and told him she had 2 dreams. One was to win the Medal of Valor. The other was to grow old with the person she loved. The person beside her also smiled at her, telling her with great conviction what she sought she would surely achieve. She believed his words, took his hand, and slowly walked home. Times had changed. Vesper turned around again, only to find no one beside her. She stood blankly for a long time before starting to walk again. Couples holding hands, noisy families of 3, and elderly couples supporting each other down the mountain constantly passed by her, but she was always alone. She didn't know how long she walked. She grew tired and sat down on a bench by the sea. She looked up, gazing at the lighthouse in the distance, twinkling uncertainly in the deepening twilight, and murmured an accusation. "You liar." The end.